Yeah, if you've been here for any other session, you might be slightly tired of my introductions, but I think they're really important, so you're going to have to listen to them regardless. Which is just firstly say thank you for coming along and giving your time to this subject topic. We've sort of worked our way through the morning in terms of relationships. We've gone through laws, Martin's Law, the Disability Act as well, and we're now delving onto the conference floor to talk about delegate safety. And that angle. And we've got a really, really great panel that I'll introduce you to in just a second. Before we do, I just want to say thank you to the lovely people at UTAC, because without their sponsorship, we wouldn't have education. They sponsor it, they care, and that's good for them. And we, I think that's a great thing. Also to Lighthouse, who've just been brilliant all day. So thank you, Lighthouse, for hearing and seeing and make us all look beautiful under the lights. That always helps. We're being filmed as well, so if you have a question or a point to make, that's absolutely fine. Don't feel too bad by the fact that they're being filmed, it's not a problem, but you should know, you never know. That as well. And, oh yeah, and for the nice, lovely, warm welcome that we've had from everyone at Leeds and Conference Leeds. It means a lot as a Leeds-based show. The city being behind you means a lot. I'm going to stop. I'm going to hand over to lovely Sam, who's going to be emceeing and guiding us through this conversation. But before I do, can you give a massive warm welcome to our panel and Sam as well, and then I'll jump off.
Thank you. Thank you, Al, and thank you, Emma, for having me back to CHS. If any of you were in Birmingham, I was invited to speak about my role as an intimacy coordinator. So I'm Sam Murray, and I work in the film industry, in the television industry, essentially, I guess, creating safe spaces, and I'll get to that in a minute. For my delegates would include the cast and the crew of that film and producers and everyone involved. So in my role, we came about because of the Me Too movement. So that's very much my origin in terms of coming as an actor and then training as an intimacy coordinator. And the reason that came up for us to speak about in events is because there's actually quite a few crossovers. We like to pop up in various places with 350 or so people. We like to bring together lots of people to create amazing moments for our entertainment reasons, but we're going to be bringing in lots of different machinations to enable that to happen, and we're very much focused on engagement at a level that also brings in a lot of vulnerability. So at the center of that, for me as an intimacy coordinator, is being responsible for consent and agreement in that space, in a place that we previously did not have that. So that's been a very big shift for my industry that came about very much around the Me Too time. So when I came into Birmingham, we had a chat about what it is, what those crossovers actually can look like, and what we had to do as an industry to very much put in place frameworks that created essentially delegates who were safe. And that includes not just A-listers, but supporting artists, not just directors and producers, but also everyone from carrying a camera to a production assistant to editorial, and lots of people involved. So there are some interesting crossovers, but today it gives me great pleasure to share the stage, and I'd like to welcome Leigh and Sian and Katie for this question, and it is very much a question of how safe are our delegates. So I'll start from straight up. I don't believe in declarations of safe spaces. It just doesn't happen as far as I'm concerned. What I do believe in is, certainly in my job, safe ways to do dangerous things. We're very much dealing with nudity. Intimacy is anything from childbirth to simulated sex scenes to torture scenes to people being tied up to working with minors and children and families. It covers a huge scope. And out of that came very much these questions of how do we build trust, transparency, and authentic engagement to create amazing, innovative, fabulous experiences for people. And I don't see that much different in the events space. So I'm really interested to start asking some of these questions. We are hoping to start with some sort of environmental, what is it we're dealing with? What do we mean by safe? I think if you can't define it, then you can't acknowledge it. You can't actually change it. So maybe we can bring up some of the areas of what does that mean to this space for delegates to be safe. And then also a little bit on the legislation. We've had this theme the whole time about legislation coming in. I work, I guess, in areas that would be covered by the Worker Protection Act. So if hopefully that's something that's familiar to everyone. Just a quick hands up, since we do polls. The Worker Protection Act changes came into play in October of last year. Could I just ask if there's a hands up for people who are aware of the Workers Protection Act? And perhaps leave your hands up if you're aware of the Worker Protection Act and you have implemented changes. Okay, and maybe for those people who are not aware of the Worker Protection Act and therefore haven't been aware of any changes. Okay, great. So we'll talk a little bit about that. So I'm essentially part of a walking, talking anti-sexual harassment policy in my role. And we do a risk-based approach, and we deal with large numbers and very high-risk situations with people who are generally naked, at their most vulnerable, possibly at the peak of their career as an A-lister, and so it's high stakes, high pressure, and lots of people involved. Again, high stakes, high pressure, and lots of people involved. So we have a lot more in common than you might think. So I'd love to start. I'd love you to introduce yourselves, and perhaps if we can start with you, Sian, introduce yourself and perhaps a response to this question that we're looking at today. And what are the standards of safety that we might be needing to look at with that legislation as well?
Of course. So my name's Sian. I'm Director of People, Partnerships and Strategic Projects at Inntel, but I'm also Governance Director of one of our largest trade associations, Beam. So I bring two hats probably to the table today. I think with my people hat on, obviously we're an employer. You talk about the big, the large, the wonderful, big creative events, but actually the Worker Protection Act is for everybody in place. It doesn't matter how small your workforce is or the size of your event. You could go to a meeting with 10 people, it still applies. So I think, bringing it back to the day job, we can talk a little bit about what we need to do. But I think from my perspective, when we used to have our employees go travelling or attend events like this, and there are some Inntel people here, it was about the physical aspect of safety. It was about getting them there safely. It was about making sure they got home safely. Now, it's not just the physical, it's the psychological, it's the well-being, it's everything else that comes along with them being out of the office, travelling in an area where they might not be comfortable. And for me, being safe means that you're comfortable and you're secure. That's my personal opinion, and I think what that means to people is very different, but those two words are the ones that resonate with me most, I think.
Yeah. Fantastic. And I think it is that individual aspect of safety, which is why I kind of reject these declarations. Oh, here's a safe space. It's because it is individual. We don't know what it means to each person. A little bit like accessibility, we do have to allow for all of it. Great, thank you.
Hi, so I'm Leigh Cowlishaw, so managing partner at Black Box Partnerships, so management consultancy. And I think going to the question, safety is non-negotiable. We need to understand and recognise that delegates attending events or on travel, we need to understand where they are. Buying open tickets or being able to have the ability to bolt on leisure and travel when they want to. We need to make sure that delegate safety remains, up there as a top priority, because ultimately, as Sian said, it's not just about the physical, it's the mental, it's the well-being, it's the ability that people need to connect with the audience, they need to connect with the event. That pressure is absolutely massive for some. Walking into a show like this, as much as it's, well advertised, you're handheld, for some people it's just too much. And everybody has a very individual need for their own well-being and what they want to do, and having that ability to build that into delegate processes, registration, that people understand what's expected of them, but also to have that handheld if they need it. And I think that's something that not all event organisers do take into consideration. We're just expecting people to come here, to know what they're doing, what's expected of them, and then you've got other aspects and other factors coming in that actually will impact massively on delegates wanting to return or what their overall experience is of that event as well.
Fantastic. So you've got that full delegate experience, and maybe we can find out a little bit about the environments that they're walking into, especially in terms of safety.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Katie Whitby. I'm head of sales for the venue selection, which is 5 venues. And I think from my perspective, it's very much around the risk of
Can't hear you. Yeah, handheld.
To be handheld. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, there we
Take
go.
two. Take two.
Start again. Can you hear me now? Is that okay? I'm not shouting. Okay, brilliant. So I'm Katie Whitby. I'm head of sales for the venues collection, and that's 5 venues in the UK for conferences and events. And I guess from my perspective, it's looking holistically, but from very much the pre-planning of an event to looking at the safety and the well-being and the demographics of who's attending that event, like you say, all the way to the very end, and actually sort of what's your expectations of that event as an event organiser? How do you want people to feel at that event? And I think psychologically that's a huge part of it, and we spoke about this. But also, not only psychologically, the behaviours, how are you expected to behave at an event, I think is really, really important, because when you get alcohol involved in hotels, inhibitions go, believe me, I know, although I haven't been drinking as much recently, I know how that can change and how it can change what people's perception are in terms of their behaviour. So I think that's a big part for me.
Yeah, so building on that idea of beginning to end, can you isolate for me, and I'll open this up a little bit, where, if we're putting ourselves in the delegate's shoes, what is it that as an organiser or that you want to be thinking about, and where does it start? Like, does it start from their front door to the train, or their front door to arriving? Where do you feel it's important to really be thinking about what you can do to effect a safety zone, I guess, around psychological, emotional and physical? Where do we start with a delegate?
I think it starts before the day of the event or the conference. It starts before they're leaving their house, because there's build-up, and the build-up is sometimes what is the biggest challenge for people, because actually once they're in somewhere, a lot of the anxiety possibly does go, not for everybody, but it's that pre-prep of getting someone there. So if I look at this with my employer hat on, for me, if I'm sending someone to an event, the first things you're asking is, why am I sending them? Is it absolutely relevant that they go? And if it is, great, then I'm going to talk through with them the way they get there, what do they want to achieve. It's all about that planning. So we're all delegates here today, right? We've come here to learn, to get something, to gain value for our companies and ourselves. But I don't know if anyone actually sat down and went, are you okay going? I don't know how many we do polls here. Did anyone actually turn around to you guys, are you okay to go to CHS, or did you just get put on a list and go? Anyone? Did someone go, do you want to go? Yeah? It's nice when they do, and there's lots of companies getting better at it, but still not all of us are there to go. Normally what you get is, I've assigned you up for the conference and you're going.
Right.
We've got to change that mindset, and especially when it's non-industry and our ones that we're relating. This is something to feed back to our clients, to go, when you're organising your events, talk about your audience, talk about them before they've even decided to go. It starts then, really, the prep and the planning. And also, don't belittle someone's fears just because you don't have them, because yes, I can walk into there and I don't have a problem with that, but I know not everyone can. So just because I can do something doesn't mean that everyone else can or wants to. So you've got to think about how they feel and talk through and challenges, and then find reasonable ways to make it better. And sometimes if you can't, it's okay that they don't go. Work on it for next year, or find another path. I think the worst thing you can do is make someone feel like they can't do their job just because they haven't been able to go somewhere for you.
And I think sometimes as well, it's not just the just the getting there. It's almost, I've got to network. I went to an event recently where I walked into a really high-profile dinner with lots of PAs and secretaries, and a bit daunting. Never been there before, and I was thinking, wow, this is actually really quite daunting walking here. I've no idea what to say. I feel really quite worked up and anxious. And went over to a couple of ladies and said, oh, you obviously know each other, and they're like, no, actually we don't. Can you come in, can you come talk to us and tell us about why you're here? And I think we all assume that everybody feels the same, and we just don't. And I think that is just so critical, to talk to people and understand what their fears and their worries are. Don't just assume. And somebody that automatically you think, oh yeah, that person's really confident and they can do that. Again, don't assume, I think, is probably the biggest thing to mention.
That don't assume is actually a mantra for us as intimacy coordinators as well. It's something we bring in. Just because someone has consented to one situation does not mean they're going to consent to the next one after lunch, because things change. So context is a really big part, or establishing context and communicating context is one of the biggest parts of our job. And the transparency of that, and then feeding back from that to producers. So that's really interesting to hear.
Yeah, and I think as well, we need to set expectations of what they will expect when they get there. At every step of the way, some people need to be handheld. They need to have the ability and the assurance to know the next step is this, and then you're going to that, and this is what you're going to look to get out of it, because people can't just go from, right, I'm going to be there all day. They need to have bite-sized chunks to break it down and say, okay, is that relevant to me? Can I cope with that? Am I going to learn something from that? I think one of the things that we talked about in the pre-call for this as well is the ability to understand what's important to them. And you're not going to satisfy 500 delegates in a room. Everybody's got individual needs, but actually there are common threads. So for me, if I'm attending a conference and it's a dinner in the evening and there's a coach and it's not leaving until 1 a.m, that's not for me.
Okay.
I need to have the flexibility that when I'm ready to leave, I will leave. But not everybody, other people will be there to the end, but we can't just, again, we go back to, you can't just assume that everybody's going to have and want the same thing. There has to be that individuality and the personalisation that actually, I know in bite-sized chunks, this is what I'm going to dip into. I'm not going to go to that. I'll come back to that. I want to learn that. Rather than just saying, right, this is it, full day programme, dinner, back on the coach at 1 a.m. Those sort of things for people are just not there. They want to mirror their lifestyle at home and have the flexibility that if it's not right, actually, do you know what, I'll duck out of that.
So can I ask as well then, if you're finding that people perhaps don't want to be going, what are the barriers? What is there? What's unsafe there? What is an unsafe space?
The unknown.
The unknown?
The unknown.
Yeah.
We
So
need to be
being informed,
Being
like
informed,
consent.
yeah.
And I think communication as well. I think the communication piece is just so important. So, as an example, I was going to an event and it was down sort of quite a lot of, I call them Dingley Dell in Yorkshire. You go down these roads, and I'd actually been informed in advance that there was roadworks. So somebody had said, actually, there's roadworks on that. You need to take a diversion, but be aware there's no signal down there. But you're only like half a mile from the venue. And actually, late at night, that was so important to me because I did feel vulnerable in that car. I did feel like, oh, actually, if I break down here, I've got no signal, there's roadworks, what am I going to do? But actually to have been informed in advance, that actually was like, okay, I can deal with this, this is no problem. So communication is and communication is paramount.
I think so. Never underestimate that even if you know someone extremely well, we don't know what their triggers are when they're walking into an event. We don't know the individual. And actually with an event of 500, 3,000 people, we will never know the things we need to know about that individual. So you do the best that you can, like you say, to make sure that everyone is as comfortable and secure as they can be. Can you get it right for 500 people individually in an event when you've never met them and you don't know, and it's not a closed set and it's not this? Possibly not, but this is all about trying to be proactive and prevent things happening to anyone. So if you've put all of the measures in place that you possibly can, I think, the worst thing you can do is do nothing, right, with anything. So at least you can save that.
Example of that is my biggest pet hate. What the hell does business attire mean?
That's so true, isn't it?
Yeah, interpretation of business. What the hell does it mean? Just say jeans and trainers are acceptable. Business attire puts people into a tailspin. You don't want to be that person that walks in with a dress and heels when everyone else is in jeans or chinos. It's, make it really explicitly clear of expectations that there is no ambiguity, there's no concern of walking in and making yourself feel out of place. And, as I say, business attire for me is the biggest pet hate. It's just open for interpretation. Let's make it easy for people to know what to pack in their case.
Great. So if we're going to make it easy for people, I want to bring us back a little bit to that idea of safety in terms of particularly, obviously, I look around the room and the majority of people I see are presenting as female, and the way we navigate the world is often related to trying to keep ourselves safe. But where is the responsibility for keeping your delegates safe? We've got the Worker Protection Act to look at preventative measures, but that going home at the end of or going to your hotel, there's not just the venue, it's not just the walk home, it's not just the hotel that you might be in. Is there anything, if we're going to be really clear about it, do you currently have behavioural expectations as part of the course for your events? Is that something when I register, for instance, is there anything around what's expected of delegate behaviour?
So with Beam, we've got a safeguarding policy, and we have it's on the website. And it's with every event that we run. That people are expected to read and listen. You know, we work in a business-to-business environment. We're not necessarily working with children where you need to read it to them. There is an expectation of self-management, I think, as well, that people will read what you've sent them. But we also have a code of conduct for events, and which lays out our expectations for speakers, delegates, attendees, everything. There is a universal agreement that we behave acceptably, but behaving acceptably can be interpreted differently. Yeah. So if you have to Leigh's point, lay out how you want people to behave. From an employer's perspective, of course we do. Anything in HR, this is the boring bit, starts with a policy. It does. It can be more interesting than that, and you can set policies up a little bit if you want people to read them, because they're not going to read 7 pages of HR policy. No. I can tell you that now, no one does. Because I go and ask if people have read it, and they're like, no. So just make them interesting, make them short and sweet, but get to your points really quickly. There's an expectation for employees of how we also behave. We are representing our companies. But also, just make it really simple. The Beam one, it's a page and a half, and it just tells people what we expect. And we have had a challenge. We had a challenge with a speaker that didn't stick to the rules. They are no longer welcome at our events. So if you put something down and you're going to do it, the other thing you need to do is follow up on it, right? That's the really important bit. I went to an event recently, and it was brilliant, because on the front it said, if you have a problem while you're at an event, call this number or text this number. I thought that was brilliant, and I hadn't seen that. I still heard about it, but we hadn't done it at our events. So I obviously nicked that idea, and we're going to use it now for all our events. But I thought that was brilliant. It's totally anonymous. It's a safe place to go and tell someone that something's wrong.
It's like the Ask Angela in pubs, isn't it? It's exactly the same as that, as having the ability that if there is an issue, who do you go and talk to, rather than walking back to your hotel being upset. It's who do you talk to right there that's going to handhold you and to make sure and give you that assurance it's okay, you're okay, you've come on this event for a reason, we're here to support you.
Yeah, and follow up with your employees when they come back from an event, ask them how it was, hopefully there's a culture in all of our workplaces that allows for that freedom of speech, that people could come back and say, do you know what, it's really bad, and whether that's because, I didn't get fed properly, or this, another person was following me for a little bit and no one did anything. It doesn't matter what they tell you. Please do take it on board and actually then work with them, feed it back to it's our job then to feed back to the event organisers or the clients to go, this wasn't okay, and I expect something to happen.
And anything to add?
Yeah, I guess from you hear me? Is it working? From my perspective as well, it's thinking from a hotel's perspective. I was in a hotel, not one of mine, I hasten to add, going for dinner with my husband, and there was a conference on, so there was about 20 of them in the restaurant, and there was one particular chap that had clearly drank far too much, and his colleagues were allowing that to happen, and he became incredibly abusive to one of the waiting staff that was in there. And actually then I was sort of looking around. Obviously you're in the industry, so you're thinking, how can I protect this member of staff? Because actually there was no suits, what I call suits, going around. There's no duty manager. There was nobody there. And I thought, hang on a minute, this poor girl, she could have only have been 17, 18. How is she dealing with that? Because he was getting more aggressive. And I'm thinking, I can't let this happen. So I quietly went over, spoke to his colleagues and said, you need to sort this out, because this isn't acceptable. Certainly not acceptable to us in this restaurant either, but more to the point to this young girl. And I guess then the question is, whose responsibility is that? Is it the hotel's responsibility, or is it the corporate's responsibility, whoever organised that conference, to have set out those guidelines for that behaviour, isn't it, I guess?
Yeah, I think it's something, if you've been following Netflix lately and adolescence, it's the idea of the village is responsible for, both, helping bring people up, but also responsible for bringing them down. So perhaps if we're following a safeguarding lead idea, we are all responsible, I would suggest, but having a designated safety lead or a designated person in the events is really useful. Part of my role is very much to be responsible for quite a narrow lane, but I bring in crew briefings, we have safe set protocols, we have guidelines, we have numbers and support numbers, and we have designated leads. So it's creating the environment to serve the engagement, the creativity, the excitement, the innovation, but everything is done with a care around creating that environment. So I'd love to open up to the room, because it's, it's all very well saying, great, we want to individually make sure everyone feels good, but, what are the concrete strategies you can put in place already that perhaps you already can build on? I was thinking, if we're talking about, with Lizzie talking about accessibility, if the survey for those accessibility needs goes out, perhaps there's other things that can be included in that email, or if I'm checking in, what QR code, pops up to give me the information about behavioural standards. It's using maybe I don't want to be hugged, and therefore I have a different colour on my lanyard. Yeah, so a lot of it is just that physical meet and greet and catch up that can sometimes stop people wanting to come to events.
I agree with that. I think it can be. I'm the person that comes over and gives somebody a kiss, but actually I recognise even more recently that actually there's quite a few people that go, I'm not a hugger, and I'm like, that's okay, and that's okay. You need to tell me, and you need to communicate with me, because that's absolutely fine. I like a hug, and I come over and give someone a kiss, but actually, if you don't like that, that's fine. Tell me, please do tell me, and I think that's really important.
That as a norm, I think has a way to go, because I think power dynamics comes into play, networking dynamics I think comes into play. So yeah, it's maybe we're bringing up more questions than answers. I think that's okay.
It was introduced during COVID, after COVID, wasn't it? We had the wristbands on saying I do want to hug, I don't want to hug, and that's kind of just gone out the window. But those are sort of things that maybe, there's things like Rail Guardian app, where everyone can download it for free. It's an app that's on your phone, and basically if you are being challenged on a train, so whether that's somebody harassing you,
Or you see it.
whether there's a fight breaking out, there's somebody getting louder, you can discreetly text the British Transport Police. They will get onto the train at the next station. Things like that should be included, in my opinion, in every delegate registration. Have you downloaded this app, for everyone to feel that they have the ability to, if something doesn't go wrong, from the moment they leave their home to when they return, that there is somebody there out to support them. And these are the simple steps that are available now, but we just don't shout about it enough or offer that to people.
No, I think so. And there's we talked about, who's responsible for this. I think everyone is responsible for this.
Yeah.
Whether you work for yourself or whether you are an employer that is sending someone somewhere, that's your responsibility to then make sure that they have all this knowledge. That we make sure all of our teams have the Rail Guardian app. We make sure they've all got numbers to call. They know where our whistle, the whistle blowing, because it doesn't have to be about us. That's that first part. Then when you're looking at, from an event organiser perspective, it is all of that information, sharing the information to the right people at the right time, and making sure they know how important it is. It is that pre-planning and that safety element. Down to the road is blocked or it's dark, and actually be honest about it. We would suggest you don't walk down here on your own, because it's not safe. So give them an opportunity, because I think, coming back to, are our delegates safe? Feeling safe means that you're in control.
Yep.
That you are in control of what you are doing, and I think that's what we all feel at work or in our home lives. So if that control is no longer there, immediately we don't feel safe.
Agree, and there's that element of agency. When you have agency, even if it's just being informed, we're trying our best. We may not have got this in place, but let us know if you need anything more. That element of just knowing that someone is looking out for you and is open to your feedback or open to your request can make a huge difference to engagement, a huge difference.
And also to ask delegates, like the Rail Guardian app, to ask delegates as part of the registration process, is there anything, any apps or any guidance that you believe could help you and other delegates on this event, to then build this library of knowledge to share with people? Because, for example, the Rail Guardian app, I use it on a personal perspective. Thank goodness I've never had to activate it, but I've shared it with all my family and friends. These sort of events and joining instructions should include that, for people to feel, that everyone's got their backs. And that's the thing, you want to feel, as Sian said, you want to feel safe, and you want to know, going on an event, we've tried to cover every eventuality. You're not going to always cover everything, but where you can just offer some guidance and support, it makes people feel more comfortable or be on their guard, and that's what we're asking for.
I think as event organisers, I see, with my other hat on, I think that is our job, to tell our corporate clients, because they might not know to include that in the delegate information, and you might not be involved fully in the entire process. You might be doing the venue finding or the event management or both, But still, when your teams and when your consultants are speaking to those clients, have you thought about your delegate safety? How is everyone getting there? Ask the questions, push them. They will never be annoyed with you for pushing delegate safety, or they shouldn't be anyway. So just tell them, have a checklist in your offices, has this client, have I asked these questions? That's the easiest way to do it.
From a commercial perspective, I'm there thinking, as you were talking about that not only does that emphasise the safety, actually you're adding value to what you do, and actually adding value certainly from a venue's perspective, for any venues that are in here, you actually caring about that customer enough to say, have you thought about all these things? It's really, really important.
And sometimes it is just being the voice of that. Certainly in my role as an advocate for actor safety or actor agency, it's very much about just being the one who asks the awkward questions sometimes, or brings it up and flags it.
And it could be like a key differentiator, rather than asking for money off your day delegate rates, it's actually, can we just share with you the value we can offer? These are the things that we can offer to you for you to share back with your delegates. That means more than getting £2 off a day delegate rate.
Great. Let's open it up to any questions or statements or thoughts in regards to keeping delegates safe, or indeed organisers safe, keeping ourselves safe as well.
Yeah, I've got a question. What do you do if a client is insistent that delegates twin in rooms and they don't know each other?
I personally, I would be saying no, thank you to attending.
Do you know?
But as the events organizer, we're booking the venue, etc., etc. And when they're firm on that, what's your view?
I think this is where, as an agent, you are there to facilitate what your client wants. Ultimately, if as a booking agent, we book events, we book clients. I'm presuming it's like one company. Or is it a public
couple,
event?
a couple. No, so a few different clients would have asked that, Okay.
I mean, that would come under their employment policies. I mean, from my perspective, if I, again, with the HR hat back on, it's an absolute no. Like, that went out in the 90s, twinning with rooms to save money. But we know there are companies that have to do it, and different industries, it's accepted. I don't know if it's our job as event agencies to say, no, your company can't do that. I think it's our job to educate, to go through, this is why, and actually bringing up the accessibility and we talked about psychological and mental health and physical health. If you cite all of those, the Worker Protection Act is a really good one to cite now, because actually that's about preventing harassment. And yes, it's based around sexual harassment, but it's harassment in general. Putting two people that don't know each other in a confined space for a long time, the common sense says that's asking for trouble. And I think it's our job to, ultimately, if the company wants to do it and it's their policy and their travel policy, then the employees will be aware of it. I would suggest our job is to educate and tell them all the things that could probably go wrong, in the hope they might change their minds.
And absolutely, and it's funny you should say that, because I actually worked for a company only up until a couple of years ago that did this on staff conferences, and we were all so uncomfortable about it, and it was categoric. That is how it was, and it was horrible. It was absolutely awful. They did put a stop to it, but so I think exactly what you say. It's about educating them, and it's about quoting certain things, quoting the policy. But they're really opening themselves up to all sorts of things. And I think all you can do as an agent is advise them to, as best you can. You've got to, just educate and advise. But I do know how difficult that can be. Really empathise with you, because it's a horrible situation. And that is only in the last 3 years. That is not that. So that is still, if it's still happening, it's appalling. But it was happening, I know, up until 3 years ago.
And I think as well, you could, as an agent, ask them to confirm to you the checks that they've put in place for anything that might happen. So say, no problem, we understand this is what you want to work, this is your travel policy. Can you let me know? Have you considered? And actually make them put it in writing, not just listen to you. Yes, I've considered this. Yes, we've got a policy for this. Yes, we've got this and this. Because then it does start the process. There is always a balance with cost over policy, and that's why I'm presuming that's why they're doing it, to keep the cost down. Also, as an agent, is there alternatives we can find? Is there a different hotel to get the bedroom rates down? Can you look at apartments as opposed, with serviced apartments where there's doors and people have got separate facilities, but the shared facilities are down. All of those kind of creative options, they might not take them, but I think we'd all feel I know if my teams were doing it, I'd feel better that we'd offered
Yeah.
all those options we could think of.
Yeah. Thank you.
Just to add to that, there's a massive area of consent legislation and consent areas that I would suggest you can highly recommend they read up on, and their liability in those cases.
Great session, by the way, guys. Something just wanted to share that we do that's slightly, it's not a question, it's something that we do, and it's to do with the mental health of people coming to events. What we try and do at some of our big events is we offer anybody who's coming on their own to pre-meet with us, one of the team, at a coffee shop or a bar or whatever before you go into one of our events, because it's quite awkward and quite, you feel insecure coming to an event on your own. So what we try and do is pre-meet those people. So there might be half a dozen people or 10 people that have already made some friends in a kind of safe space, and then come in. We found that's gone down really well, and people really appreciate it. I just wanted to share it.
Yeah, no, that's a great idea. Buddying systems, one-to-ones. Even if you introduce people on teams before the event, and just say you've got some face there that knows someone.
Familiarity.
Yeah, it is.
And I think as well, with trained colleagues in the space as well, using your transport as part of that pre-meet. So don't just allow people to go through the door like you do here. Who's boarding a train together? How can we group people that they have an hour and a half together to get to know each other, and actually using a mode of transport as part of the event rather than just waiting for people to walk through. It's these sort of small things that can make a huge difference. You say it's that familiarity, and it's giving people the opportunity of having a face that they know somebody and feel safe.
And of course, if you do want to sit on your own on the train and come up because you don't want to actually socialise with anyone, that's also perfectly acceptable.
It really is.
It's all about freedom.
Time
it's
out,
all
time
about
out.
choice.
All about choice.
Yeah.
Any other questions? How am I going for time?
I've just been really interested by this move towards legislation from best practice, and it sort of moved away sort of this responsibility to accountability. And we always say it's everyone's accountability, but there's a great big hole between everyone's accountability, and I'm just wondering whose accountability is it really?
In terms of safety as a general word,
Yeah, because we could all share it around venues, delegates, all that sort of stuff, but
And there's a real danger.
that's ready to fall.
There's a massive thing called indemnity clauses, which is what most people put in their contracts, which means that you go to indemnity and you find the person that's responsible right at the very end of the chain, generally in law and legal stuff. From an employer perspective, ultimately, the buck stops with us to make sure that our employees are safe wherever they are. If they are travelling, attending something for a business reason, something happens to them, and we haven't put mitigations in, that is with us, the buck stops there. So that's your clients, effectively. We're coming back to what you were saying, your clients are ultimately responsible. You're not responsible because you booked twin bedrooms, right? That's not possible. They are responsible for booking them if something happens, because the legislation is employer. If something happens at an event that is the event have let happen, like say for instance we put in here excessive amounts of alcohol in here that led to behaviour that was not acceptable, and we haven't put any safeguarding in, and we haven't advised people of how to behave, and we haven't done all of this stuff, I would suggest that in law the event organiser would be found legally responsible for that, generally, for something that would happen for inappropriate behaviour. The law is very much about mitigation. You have to have mitigated everything. This is where it gets unsexy, really, but this is the truth. You have to, and we're talking about prevention rather than reaction. And in law, it's all about have you mitigated? So responsibility is the organiser or the employer, really, realistically, or the end supplier if you're using a product or a service.
Yeah, so that idea that it's not a retrospective fix, and perhaps where before with Worker Protection Act, it's sort of going in a little nutshell, it's not so much about the complaint system, like it happens and then the complaint policy we all know about. It's making sure it doesn't happen in the first place. It's making sure those preventative, proactive steps are in play. It means understood, visible, written, accessible, clear on what's expected in that
And
space.
consequences as well, personal consequences. I remember going EIBTM years ago, and I mean years ago, and I woke up, we'd been out pretty much all night drinking, and I remember waking up in the morning with my bedroom door wide open, and I was laying on my bed and had to go, and I was just like, I can't do this, it's absolutely ridiculous, I wouldn't do this at home. But again, with alcohol, and you let your guard down, you open yourself up so much risk. And I think again it's the expectations but also the consequences, and having to handhold people. We're encouraging new blood through the industry, and we've got to set a standard of this is not acceptable behaviour, and this is how we expect, and this is the safeguard and support we'll provide you.
And
Sorry, just having a 15-year-old son, he's actually better than me. I don't know about anybody else's
I'm
children.
not surprised, Kate.
Yeah. I know what she means. It's true. But he tells me, he said, you can't do that, or you can't say that, or something. And actually, so I think, as long as we continue to, I think it'll come as we go through the next few years. But I think, these children are telling us what to do. But yeah, you're right.
Are you finding that in your venues, though, that people are asking you not to serve as much alcohol at the events?
Yeah, that's definitely becoming. I mean, it's not ideal for us. No, no, no. They definitely. I think there's becoming limits, and I think. We are getting actually asked for alcohol-free events as well, because actually you're there from a business perspective. You're not actually there to get absolutely hammered and then not perform the following day, which does happen, and actually I want people to come away from an event actually feeling like they've achieved and they're actually energised, as opposed to feeling, oh my God, I'm going to die, I need 3 days to recover, And I think that's where we all need to just remember why we're holding these events.
I think just to come back on your point as well, which is another useful trick, we've done quite a lot of work on bystander training as well, which is really important. I definitely have a look at that for your organisations. That's to the point of being able to intervene without fear and being able to do it properly when something is happening to someone else. And they do this quite a lot in schools. That's what reminded me of it, because my kids have gone through it as well. But any form of harassment is not okay, but you can deal with it without putting yourself in danger. It focuses on that as well, because you obviously don't want to put yourselves in danger.
On the trains they do that big bystander program, don't they?
That's a really useful thing to look into. And there's loads of good resources, free resources online to do it. You don't need to pay a lot of money to find out all these things.
Yeah, and of course I would add to that consent education. If you're under the influence of alcohol, it's going to limit your ability to consent. That is a law unto itself, and that bystander intervention is incredibly important.
Yeah.
Great. I think we need to wrap it up. So any last thoughts? I think we've given hopefully lots of ideas or things to think about in terms of safety and defining safety and choices and agency in safety. So thank you so much to Leigh, Sian and Katie. Much appreciated. Thank you.